Hello everyone, this is another video covering the basics of the terrain mixer. My name is Marco and I'm the author of the terrain mixer tool for Blender. First, let's go through the structure of the terrain mixer. So when you download the package, this is how your final setup should look like. So you'll have a root folder with the current version of the terrain mixer inside. For example, version 1.9.5 or whatever the latest version will be. And then what's important, that you add the existing maps folder, which you will also download as a separate package, and add it to this root folder, and the structure inside should look something like this. Now, sometimes the files or the maps folders will change, and you will see this change as a different number at the end of the zipped folder name. So most of the time you'll be just replacing the blend file here. So this is about the folder structure, and then we have the logic behind the terrain mixer, behind its properties menu. What's important to understand, that details that you see on terrains come mostly from the height maps, which are stored in the previously shown maps folder and its subfolders. These height maps are what defines the inputs, and in terrain mixer we have 4 inputs and the additional input which is controlled by the scatter master. So inputs are then mixed with the mixer sliders and blend sliders, which are here, and then you can also switch between the height map sources for each input. Although this might look a bit complicated now, I will show you that it's really easy to understand once you start using the terrain mixer. So when you want to start working, you will most probably be doing that inside the terrain mixer workspace. This is this first tab here, and the workspace has this thing called the properties menu on the right side, which is pretty big, but it's very simple to understand. So first you have this 6 sliders for mixing and blending the inputs. Then you have this additional 4 sliders, which are named switch 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I use for switching height map source. And then you have for each of the inputs you have the option to clip, mirror, add or remove power, rotation, and scale. So these are repeating for all 4 inputs. And then when you scroll all the way down, you have the scatter master sliders, and this is the 5th input, which is defined by the sliders here, and the height map, which you will connect to it. And how to do that I will show you a bit later. Now let's go through the mixing sliders. So here we have the sliders that are marked with A, B, and C. This C slider controls the influence of the mixes 1, 2, and 3, 4. So if I would move it all the way to the left, now I would only see the influence of sliders of the inputs 1 and 2. So if I move this slider left or right between the inputs 1 and 2, you would see how this affects the terrain. Now I will also, before I move to these other mixing sliders, I will also show you how you can switch the height map source for each input. So we already have the C slider moved all the way to the left, which means, as previously mentioned, that we now see the influence of the sliders 1 and 2 depending on where this of the inputs 1 and 2 depending on where this slider is. So if I move this slider, this first one, all the way to the left, now I would only see the input 1 and the details provided by the height map 1. Now if I want to switch the height map, I would do that here where it says input 1 switch 1. So if I move all the way to the right, I would see the new height map source. And of course I can do any value. I can choose any value between, like so. Okay, so this is how you switch between height map sources. Now let me just show you same as before. If I move the C slider all the way to the right, now I would see the input, the mix between input 1, input 3 and input 4. And if I move it all the way to the left, now I only see the input 3. And if I move it all the way to the right, now I only see the input 4. And also what's important to mention, that you can also blend between the inputs. So if I go here, you see this B blend 3 and 4, and we have a similar situation here, A blend 1 and 2. I can just do this, and this changes the blend between the two. All the way to 17. Let's move back to 1. Now, since we're already here, and we see this input number 3 active mostly, I will show you the other operation that you can do for each input. So let's move all the way down to the input 3 sliders, which are here. So first you have clipping. You can clip from the bottom, and you can clip also from the top. You have mirror on X and Y axis. You have mirror on the Z axis as well, which gives you like a negative value down in the ground, so it can be used as a creator, or depending on the shape of the input and its height map source. Let's move this back. You can also decrease or increase the power. You can rotate the input. And you can also scale it. This scaling is performed in X and Y axis, so it doesn't affect the height of the terrain of the input, because you can adjust it with the power slider. Now, besides all these controls that we had here, we also have something called scatter master, and what it does, it scatters the additional height map source throughout the terrain. So depending on what your height map source is, you will get the wanted result. So for example, if we activate it, like so, we can do some similar operations. We can have it clipped from the bottom, which actually raises the terrain. We can clip it from the top, of course, like so. We can invert it, so it's similar to the Z mirror for other inputs. We can change the power, like so. We can rotate them, scale, same as before, it's scaling on X and Y axis, and of course you can add more power. You can increase the number of scattered elements by going to this scatter slider. Shift on X and Y axis. There's also an operation named smudge, which kind of distorts all the elements. You can get some really interesting results with it. And then we can also soften, which kind of blends it with the ground, with the existing terrain, like so. Okay, I'll deactivate it now. Now, in case you want to change the source, the HEIGHTMAP source for any of the inputs, you can do that by going to the node tree, node settings for the terrain mixer. But before we do that, I will just move the slider back to 0, the C, so we only see the mix 1 and 2, and I will also move it towards 2.2. So we have a bit of a mix from the input 2, but input 1 is the pronounced one. Okay. Now I will go to other workspace named Terrain Mixer plus Nodes, and here I will try to change the source, the HEIGHTMAP source for the input 1. So I do that by selecting this node group here, this node frame, and going here and press dot on the numpad. Now I see this HEIGHTMAPS frame, and I see this switch 1, 2, 3, and 4 node groups. Inside those node groups, in each of them you have 2 image sources. So if I would want to change the image source, the HEIGHTMAP source for the input 1, I would do that by going here or here. Depends on where your switch slider for the input 1 is. So I would go here, go 1 level up, HEIGHTMAPS 2, and for example choose this one. Now you see I have a different image source. I'll go back here and get back the old HEIGHTMAP source. Now also while we're here, I will show you another operation that is similar to the smudge operation for the scatter master, and that's distorter. So you can go here and just move the slider a bit. This is very useful because it gives you some additional details, interesting details. It breaks the terrain, stretches it, distorts it, and you can use it when you want to make a shot of the mountain range, or anything that's maybe observed from the bigger distance, larger distance. Sorry for my English. So I use this a lot when I want to do renders of some huge terrain. You know, it really helps with all the details that it introduces to the scene. So let me move this back. Now let me go here. Here we have also some very interesting options, and I will show you. These are mostly used for either breaking the terrain in smaller parts, similar to what you would do with scatter, or for just masking you know, areas. For example, you need a flat terrain on a certain area where we want to put some sort of architecture or anything like that. Of course, you can do clipping from bottom and the top for each of the inputs as previously shown, but you will see how this can help you. So first, let's go through these two. Those are Canonizer and Cascader. So with Canonizer, you basically plug it here and you get some sort of canyons happening. So if you change this value, you will see that the number of canyons are increasing, and if you choose this value, you're kind of giving a contrast to the affected area. Now let's move to Cascader. With Cascader, you will get cascades or stairs. So let me show you how it works. The value here is defined between 0.9 and 1. So you would probably want to hold shift while sliding these sliders, so you can get like finer values. So shift, you see how it changes this terrain. It gives us like these cascades. Now we can also increase the number of those cascades, you know, depending on what you need. So you can like really go crazy with it. And of course you can combine the two by replugging this, and you can get like really complex terrain. Okay, let's move this back to one which deactivated. Now we have masking. So to activate masking, you would want to go here to this add image mask. Actually, let me use this opportunity to rename it to add mask only, because now we have, besides the image mask, we also have the ellipse mask, which I will show you how to use. So just plug it here and watch what will happen with the terrain on the left. You see this hole. So this is the image mask. So first I'll jump all the way to the 4th and 5th row because I want to increase the size of it. So sorry, the 3rd and the 4th row, you see. Then move back to the 1st row. You can affect the depth. see. We can come a bit closer so we can see better what's going on. Then we can clamp it with which kind of adds the pressure on top of the terrain. It's not clamping, it's not clipping, it's more like adding weight to the overall terrain. So it works like this. Then we can shift it in X and Y axis. We can rotate it, but we'll see this better if we change the ratio of this spherical mask. So let's change the scale on the y-axis, and then if we rotate it, you see what's going on. Now this is also a good opportunity to show how shifting it can, you know, affect a certain area of the terrain. So give it a bit more depth. Then we have something interesting here, which was added in the version 1.9.5 and 1.9.4 before it. So we have the canyon influence and cut influence. So let's first start with the cut influence. You would increase this value towards 1. So, and then you would go to cut part, move it here. So as you can see, this is really powerful. You can also randomize those cuts. Cut some more. And again affect the influence. So you see that like with just 2-3 sliders we have totally changed the terrain. You can see it here a bit better. And of course, if we increase the subdivision levels here, we'll get even finer details. Usually I go all the way to 7, but 6 is good for previewing without affecting the performance. Okay. In the version 1.9.6 you will have a new workspace available, and that's the terrain mixer plus mask nodes. So if we go here, you will see how it looks. It's almost identical to the terrain mixer workspace. The outliner window is replaced with a node shader window, so as well as the properties window, so you can just move easily from one type of image mask, from image mask to ellipse mask. And in this upper window we can just change this. So let me move this all the way down. And now let's see the canyon option. So let's increase the canyon influence all the way to here. Canyon scale. It is very similar, with the difference that it has roughness, and the formations, if we view it from above, are a bit different. They're literally forming canyons. So let's add a bit of roughness here. Increase the scale. Add more influence. And also we can play with power and sharpness. So it's more pronounced like this, and maybe even more realistic. So a bit larger chunks here. Okay, and we can also distort it, like so. So you can really go inside with the camera, you know, depending on what you're doing and for what purpose would you use such option. And also we can go back to the terrain mixer, workspace, increase the subdivision level to 6 or more. See it from this perspective. So by adding contrast, you're actually stretching the polygons between the positive and negative value of your height map. Okay, I won't waste any more of your time on this. Now we can move to the ellipse mask. So just connect it here as before. The mask is a bit smoother because this is procedurally defined, so it has a bit of a noise added to it, but same as before, you can change the scale of the mask, like so. You can change it only on one axis, for example Y. You can shift it, like so. You can also rotate it. And of course you can add canyons and cuts. I will just go through one of them because we already did it for the image mask. So add more influence, increase the scale or decrease the scale. Distort it a bit. So you see, this is more like some sort of sandy rocks, you know, which are a bit smoother than what we had with image-based mask. Okay, now the last thing I want to show you is how to change the preview shader, the preview color. So let's move here actually and go all the way here where you have this orange frame named fast shade. Of course, if you want to go there faster, you would select it here and press dot on your numpad. So these two colors are defined by these two diffuse nodes, and if you want something more realistic like rock and snow, what you would do, you would connect this node here and this node here. And in a separate video tutorial I will go through the texturing, but you will have to wait a while for it because I want to improve the overall texturing system for the terrain mixer. Now let's see how to prepare everything to bake the height map. So for that, first you would want to disconnect the displacement like so. Then you would want to disconnect the color shader and connect the surface, and then you get this. You could have also just plug it here. So it's the same thing. Now you see that you already have this black and white image showing up, and all that's left is rendering it. But before you press render, you just have to change the camera, which is already here active, auto camera for baking, and change the resolution to get a square image. So for example, I don't know, of course the higher the resolution, the more details you will get on your height map. So I usually crank it up all the way to 8K. Let's make it 1K now. And if you go here, for example, and press 0, you would see the view and the camera view. So you just press F12 now, or go here and render image. And when it's rendered, you'll go to the image, save as, and then save it as OpenEXR 32-bit. That's important to get all the fine details from your height map. Baking a color map is very similar, but for that you should check our PDF manual for terrain mixer. And that's it. Hope you managed to come all the way to the end of the videos, and if you have any question, please write below the video or send a message or join our Discord channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be in touch soon.